Christian here.
Yes. Hello.
Excellent. Episode 34 of Cookie Pocket. This podcast is about film. How are you kids doing today?
I'm doing all right, Mitch. All right.
All right. So, we are discussing Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I'm taking my time between my jokes, like this film does sometimes too often. Monty Python and the Holy Grail is a 1975 British comedy film directed by Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones, the Terry Boys, and was written and performed by Monty Python, the comedy group of which they came from, which also consists of Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, and... Oh, I already said Terry Jones. Oh, well. Terry Jones, number 2, and Michael Palin. The film is essentially a parody of the Arthurian legend, English class terms, can't pronounce, completely pummeling it to dust with 527 jokes, with an average of a joke every 10 and a half seconds. I did not clock that myself. Some IMDb...
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
It stars a lot of sirs and peasants and women in a special castle that is definitely not from 2021. So, what did you guys think of the film? I'm done my tirade.
Well, I guess I'll jump in first, as I am often wont to do. So I enjoyed this film. I think Monty Python and the Holy Grail is probably up there with Ghostbusters as one of the most quoted movies of all time. Even if you haven't seen this film, you probably know most of the bits and most of the gags from it, because high schoolers and theater kids of the more annoying variety are very fond of quoting it. I will say, though, compared to later Monty Python efforts, this is probably one of my... this probably falls lower on the scale of my preferences for their films. Partially because, although the jokes are very funny and the acting is absurd and whatnot, although the content is humorous, it's not really filmed with any kind of style, which sort of takes away from the film, in my opinion. One of the reasons this movie's so funny is that in a lot of cases there's totally absurd things happening on screen, and everybody in the film takes it entirely seriously. The knights who say "nyeh," for instance, are entirely absurd, but everybody in the film acts like they're entirely terrifying. And that's kind of where the humor comes from. I think if they were filmed in a way that made them look imposing and frightening and almost added to it to kind of put us in the perspective of the characters, if it had a little more style in that regard, it could have kind of complement the humor. And since that's not there, I do think it takes away from the film a little. But it is still an absolute classic. It's really funny. It's a 4 out of 5. When I watch it, I can't help think of things that Monty Python later did with their films that could have maybe been done here to spice it up a little bit.
So if it was more like Suspiria, is what you're saying?
No. If it had more of a noticeable style, which Suspiria does, yes. But then again... Mr. Bean's Holiday has a noticeable style as well, so...
Nice. Okay, Christian. You
Well,
can go now.
Zach, I don't know what you have against Mr. Bean all of a sudden. I'm learning a lot about your critical processes lately, it would seem, because I'm going to have to disagree with you on your style note. One of my favorite things about this film is how it just presents as it is, and it doesn't really feel the need to mock up anything more. Like, the jokes are just the jokes, and I guess when I watch a movie, I'm not really thinking, unless if it's for Cookie Pocket sometimes, I'm not really thinking about like lighting or shot composition or anything especially technical, and the same goes for like a book or a song. Like I'm not really... All right, maybe sometimes for a song because I'm a music minor. But anyway, that's besides the point.
Well, yeah, I'm a film major, so we're in the same boat here. I'm
a computer science major.
Yeah, so whenever you use the internet, you...
And
I'm also a history minor.
Explains a lot. What was I trying to say? I care less about style, I think.
Yes, I think you do.
At least in this context. And I think maybe this is even specific to the genre of comedy. Like I think the jokes are the jokes, kind of, and I like how those are presented purely, and I couldn't help but think that Seth MacFarlane must have seen this movie many times.
Oh,
because
totally.
there are a few bits that are like Family Guy bits when Seth MacFarlane doesn't know how to end the joke, except it works kind of better here, and of course this was so far before Family Guy. But anyway, I liked it a lot. I had seen this film before and had given it a 4 out of 5, and I'm sticking with that number. I think it's really great. It's occasionally, I guess, a little draining for the same reasons we might call an Edgar Wright film tiring, because of how much it how many things happen so quickly. But I like it. I think it's great. I think it's deservedly iconic.
I would tend to agree with Christian more than Zach, I would say. Except with all the good things Zach said I agreed with. But I also am not... I think what's important is what's important from an objective, subjective standpoint.
All right, thank you, Yoda.
And I think style is... I think everything is connected, like the tree in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I think that style only matters if it's a priority of the director.
Yeah.
And Monty Python does not care about style, so they're not going to put emphasis on style. Huh? What were you going to say, Zach? You can interrupt.
I think they do. I think they do care about style, because the show has a very definite style. And even in later films, like Meaning of Life, I'm not saying you constantly need like a fast-paced, really visual like style that kind of consumes the whole film. But in The Meaning of Life, for instance, whenever Death shows up, he's shot with kind of a gloomy, atmospheric air that makes him look very dramatic, and that kind of adds to the humor, because you have this really heavy, dramatic-looking character in an entirely undramatic situation. So I do think they care about style. I just think this being their first kind of foray... That's a word. I wanted to say foyer. Their first foray into filmmaking outside of television. I don't think they've quite figured out how to work style into their films rather than into the more restricted television landscape.
Okay. Fair point. However, I'm just kidding. I think this film is hilarious, and I think that there's a certain they attack a lot of different like forms of comedy that's really easy to appeal to everyone with, and I think that's a lot harder than say like Deadpool, which kind of relies on a lot of crude humor, and just Deadpool being Deadpool that everyone expects Deadpool to be, as well as Ryan Reynolds, because they're basically the same freaking person. So so this is definitely a lot more complex than it may appear on a first viewing, maybe. And I think there's a lot of substance that is really never. I don't really see it often at all in modern comedies. I don't think it'll ever really be reached again. In a lot of ways, I'm not saying these are like super complex, like you have to be huge brain to figure out like what these jokes mean. I just feel like that there's a lot of there's just such a heavy mix of different types of jokes and the lengths at which they're approached, and just I don't know. They really cared. It feels like they really put a lot of thought and love into a lot of different aspects of it, and I just think that really comes across in a lot of ways. For the most part, I feel like there's like right when I was like squinting my eyes in the beginning at the credits, I'm like, I don't know, I think maybe a 3.5 or a 4, but like Zach had mentioned, I feel like it definitely picks up later on. So I'll start out by saying this film did come out in 1975, so I believe none of us were born yet by that point.
Yes.
And it's full of, as Terry Gilliam once said, typical Python nonsense. So what parts aged badly for you, and do you think the aged parts are justified by their time, or do you think that they could be altered and just removed completely, coming from either like now perspective or the perspective of them at the time making the film?
I don't really know if any of it's aged badly. I think all of it is at least still funny to a certain extent. The only bit that I think maybe isn't really all that funny now, and maybe was funnier in '75, is I think it's Sir Gawain. I'm not sure. Somebody the Chaste. When
Galahad.
Galahad. There we go. When he goes to the castle, and there's all the, I guess they're nuns, ladies there, and
They're
they all,
not nuns, Zach. They're definitely not nuns.
Yes, of course. I'm not up to date on my Catholicism. But they all want to have sex with him. And at the time, I could see that being amusing because it's still, I mean, the days of cinema, of the Hays Code and whatnot, and of films being extremely limited in, like, you can't even talk about sex on film. Like, that were less than 10 years ago at that point. So I think the sort of, ooh, a naughty sex joke in a movie, it was still sort of risque. But nowadays, we have, like, sex and violence and full frontal nudity, even in our comedies, like, minute after minute. So I don't think that's quite as effective as it might have been in '75. I think the gags, like, are still sound. I don't think it's insulting, but I don't think it's as funny as it probably was then.
I still think it's fairly funny. I mean, with respect to that specific gag, I think the only part that hasn't aged especially well is when the one woman says that they're all aged from 16 to 19 and a half. That maybe is not the ideal range for a 2021 audience.
That's kind of the point, but
yeah. Yeah, I know. And I mean, in context, I think it works. I don't like I hesitate to defend this too staunchly, but you know, it's from 1975, and yeah, I
Stop talking.
Yeah.
Would you like me to help you digging this hole?
I'll just lay in my bed as I've made it, Zach. Thank you.
For some reason, I have a particular problem with the animated parts. And I understand like the transitions and stuff, like the general transitions, but right when they're making jokes within the animation, I feel like it was just overused.
Oh, that's
I know that's a very
stuff,
common Python thing.
Yeah.
Which I don't like, but that's just my personal preference.
I wish there was more. It hurts.
Okay, Zach, your opinion is
I'm gonna
invalid.
fence it.
I'm gonna sit on this fence really high, away from you misogynists.
Okay, well, I do not wish that there were more, but I do think the one gag wherein the animated monster is chasing them, but then the animator dies, that's like maybe the funniest part of the whole movie for me.
I agree.
But yeah.
And I
also almost feel like you go ahead, Zach.
I was gonna say I'm pretty sure the animator is played by Terry Gilliam, and he did all the animations for the show, so that adds another layer of humor to it as well.
Yes. Okay, fair. That's fair. But I mean that's. I don't know. I feel like there was... I like the scenes in general. I just feel like it hurts the pacing. And I do feel like there is pacing here. Because a lot of the time, you'd feel like the films that have such... like are so rapid fire on the gags are like doing it more recklessly than controlled. And I feel like the narrative is just barely there to the point where you want to see what they actually do, like what happens. You know, and just having that, all you need is, Python understood that all they need is that one thing. They just need some great thing to go after. And then they can do whatever they want in between. Yeah. And as we find out, they don't even get to that thing anyway. And that was a perfect rendition, but we'll talk about that later. So what do you think is the most important component of the film that makes it as timeless and accessible as it is nearly half a century later?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure if this is like my definitive answer, but something that was already on my mind before you'd asked that question was the pacing, like you said, and sort of the space between each joke and the rapid fire nature of it. And I think maybe in that regard it has aged well, because I think a lot of older films are not concerned with being as quick off the draw, whereas I think it's generally true that films that are made more recently understand that audiences tend to have a shorter attention span, and that's not an issue at all with this, despite the fact that it's my goodness, like almost 50 years old. I guess that's crazy. Yep. So I guess I would say in some strange way, the pace is a strength, even if it's occasionally tiring. I think it's more so a strength than it is a weakness for attention span reasons.
I think, in terms of comedy at least, one of the greatest strengths here is the total lack of time-specific pop cultural references. Because I think that's what kills a lot of comedies, specifically from like the 2000s and the 2010s, is the constant, Nicki Minaj, Deadpool, Lady Gaga, like jokes that
Zach,
work,
no.
that have a shelf date of like that week. And then so like the next year, everybody's like, what is this? This isn't
I can't
funny
believe you
anymore.
think so little of Nicki Minaj's career, Zach.
Like my point is though that these jokes at the expense of like current personalities or whatever's in the media that week tend to age really poorly, regardless of what year they come out, because people forget about tabloid gossip. Maybe it doesn't take a month or a year, but after a decade or more, they're gonna forget about it. And this film doesn't have any of that. All the humor in this is able to stand entirely on its own as a film or as a joke in its own right. It doesn't need you to have studied 1975 going in to know, okay, they're going to make a joke about the Queen because she fell over at this point at a press gala. Like, you just, all you need to do is watch the movie and you can get the jokes, and you don't need to have that dated perception of the time going in.
And they can rely on the assumption that nobody knows anything about King Arthur at all.
Yeah.
And even if you do, it's completely useless. And they joke at that quite a few times.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is really easy, to go off of. But I don't know. I don't know what I think Zach really had a good point. I think you both had good points, but I think Zach really had a particularly good point concerning the pace, not the pacing. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore.
Zach, you and your
I don't
points.
know. Dang it, Zach was so big brain. I like both of what you said was so good. I don't even know what I can follow up with, but I like their cohesion and their ability to portray jokes in such an accessible way where it's like they're like not only that they're not time restricted, but also they're just they're anti-jokes. There's a lot of anti-jokes which have to be executed correctly. And just a lot of the self-aware humor is well paced out. There's not a lot of like consistent, like Christian had mentioned about Family Guy. Family Guy does this all the time, and it kind of destroys a lot of the episodes.
Yeah.
Everything's so self-aware that it's like it appears more as a mess than it is anything else. But I think the anti-jokes really are the most memorable moments, and I feel like just the self-awareness that it has is so easily adaptable to any situation that the Monty Python crew finds themselves in, and I feel like that's one of the better parts. I should mention, by the way, that Zach is a avid fan of Cardi B. As I go on to this completely unrelated question.
Okay, I think WAP is funny. All right, that doesn't mean I'm a fan
Zach
of
thinks
Cardi
Oh
B.
no,
Zach
Zach,
thinks,
no.
Okay. Anyway, Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones have never directed before, right? And consider this an opportunity to learn how to direct. So, do you think this inexperience ever comes across as a detriment to the quality or effectiveness of the film as a comedy? Or does it contribute to its staunch focus on absurdity and irony?
How tremendously relatable.
You have the box to fill in your answer for this BCR.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to write in cursive, really small, so I can fit more in the box. So, I already mentioned that I think the lack of a style kind of... it doesn't hurt some of the jokes, but in some cases I think they could have made more of jokes with more of a visual style. But I will say, and I've been talking to Christian about this recently as he's taken his first step into directing film. Most people have some kind of... It doesn't matter if you're a trained director necessarily. If you have a thing that you want to see and you're able to execute deliberately, what you want to do in order to put that on film, then you're a director, and you're going to get something that works in some regard 9 times out of 10. And I think they have that here. Maybe they've never directed before, but they know what they want, and they know what's funny, and they have experience as comedians, and they know about timing. And if you know about timing, then you're halfway to knowing how to edit. So they have all the tools there to make a film. So maybe this movie is a little flat, but I think, they knew what they were going for. And therefore, I think the film comes across exactly as they wanted it to.
Okay.
Nice job dodging the question, Zach. Because it was presented as a two choice. Is there inexperience good or bad? And I can tell Zach thinks to some extent it's bad based on our prior style debate.
He's gonna get a 2 on this AP exam.
Well, I think that it is a benefit, and I don't really have much to add to my early comments about style, but I really just think the jokes are the jokes. And I don't know. I think there's something to be said about presenting something in its purest form, if that's a lo-fi recording or an inexperienced product from an inexperienced director. I don't know. I think it, like Zach said, even if you're not a director, if you're passionate enough about something that you choose to spend a tremendous amount of time and effort creating it, then there's going to be something there. And I think sometimes style can subtract from that if that's too much of a thing. So the jokes are the jokes, and they're really good, and that is all I have to say about that.
I tend to agree with Christian.
Wow.
Again.
I'm 0 for 2 this episode.
Anytime I tried to focus on the direction, I instantly remembered that this was Monty Python and we have to find the freaking Holy Grail. Okay, that's what I remember, Zach. Okay, I'm not like, wo ist meine Style? I don't know where it is. There's not enough. The framing here is just so bad. I'm like, no, Zach, you're missing
it's never
the point.
bad. It just could be better.
It's Castle Anthrax, Zach. Okay, it's Castle Anthrax. It is there. Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And yes, there are moments where the direction is very like I filmed this, but the plot may not thicken. But you know what? The jokes are funny, and that's that. Christian Maric 2021.
Yeah.
And I think that the acting and the synergy in the group stands so well on its own. In this case, in a lot of cases, I do occasionally agree. Though there are some scenes where you realize that it's dragging out, the gag is dragging out, and then you start to notice all of the normal things that you would expect in a film that happens to be good, according to Zach Garrigus. So, but in any other case, I mostly I'm pretty indifferent to it, you know. But I thought it wasn't that bad, considering it was their first time, and it was a huge foray for them, a foyer, as Zach had so eloquently said, using his French language. So Michael Palin, who literally played 12 characters in this, said nearly everyone played the characters they had written. Also, Terry Gilliam once explained that if one member leaves, the entire group dies, similar to the Beatles, apparently. He himself dies 4 times in the film. Do you think the Monty Python troupe functions better as a comedy group and isolated skits, or as a cast of actors that each play different characters in a lower budget looking full length film?
I think those two are kind of the same thing.
Not necessarily.
Because every scene in this movie, every scene in basically every Monty Python movie, is basically just a sketch. Mm-hmm. And the movie is like an elongated episode of Monty Python's Flying Circus that happens to be set in medieval England. I think they, in bringing themselves to film, I think Monty Python absolutely knew what their strengths were and knew how they could adapt themselves to film, because this basically is just like a set episode of the show with a theme. So you could take 2 scenes from this and show them to somebody, and they might think they were by the same people, but they wouldn't necessarily go, oh yeah, that's the same movie. Like if you took, I don't know, the Spamalot sequence, and then you put it next to the animator having a fatal heart attack. Like somebody might guess that those were made by the same people, but I don't necessarily think they would say, oh yeah, that's the same movie. and this is what the plot of said movie is, and that guy has that arc, and that guy has the other. I think it's very much just like scene, kind of a plot, and then they get arrested. Like it's very Python in how absolutely absurd and nonsensical and lacking in a story it is.
Okay.
Well, Zach, it seems I can never agree with you.
I'm familiar with the situation.
To be fair, I haven't had any Monty Python experience outside of this film. I've never seen any of the show or even like Life of Brian or anything else. It's on the list, but who knows when that list will be complete. But I know they're kind of like loosely interconnected sketches, but I wouldn't understate the story. Like I think things are pretty clearly connected. Like it's certainly much more cohesive than some random SNL episode. Like to me, it didn't feel like everything was so far out of left field. I think the variety of the jokes might contribute to a similar feeling, but it never felt like, to me, a bit was included for the sake of including the bit that then subtracted from the story. So I didn't really have, I guess, I didn't think the similarities to a sketch show were ever an issue as far as the story went, but I can't really say much about how it compares to their show, having not seen any of it.
I would say SNL might not be the best direct comparison, just because SNL being live and having constant celebrity guests makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, with the timely references and everything.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So if you had like the top 10 SNL actors make a movie, how would that go?
Oof.
You'd have to have them be friends and make a show for several years first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone
put Chevy Chase in therapy stat.
Yes. Oh God. Vegas Vacation. I love that one.
Oh.
And yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I agree. I agree with Christian.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's not a lot of deep plot investment and character investment, but there's a lot of it on a shallow end, and like it's really light. Like there's very slight character differences, not just because of the actors, but because of the actual characters, because the characters are actually very slightly different in the way that they're portrayed, and then we see that with their so-called backstories that end up just being ridiculous anyway. But still, I feel like there's a little bit of substance in them. I don't feel like they're absolutely so spontaneous that they have to rely on the overarching narrative. I feel like that the scenes themselves and the kind of prequel renditions for each character, I feel like have some substance in them. Even though it becomes meaningless, I feel like it's there in those sequences. And I think that's one of the contributing reasons why it isn't just a set of skits and then connected by the Arthur thing and the Grail. I also feel like the characters have like a building kind of thing. Not to the extent of something like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where the scenes you remember are funny because you know what to expect from the actors as well as the characters that are actively being developed and actually have really good arcs. I think in this case, I feel like there's just enough of like little boop, character arcs here and there that I feel like it keeps the audience interested in the plot, not only just for what's going to be the next gag, in my opinion. But I can totally see that there's definitely a lot of that you can kind of see seeping through that in certain occasions, that it's just a skit on top of this narrative. But to each his own. I'm gonna go back on my fence now.
Even if they are disparate skits, pretty much all of them are grounded in some sort of medieval sensibilities.
Right.
Like I don't think you could make jokes about marrying for huge tracts of land in any timely context. So
right.
I like they all share a pretty similar setting.
Yeah, and the setting is also a big contributor, and then that also ends up not mattering as I foray into my own. I'm using foray now. This is my new verb that I've been provided by Mr. Garrigus. Fun fact. Arthur's army at the end was entirely made up of 175 students from Scotland's University of Stirling. How about the ending, and can we all agree on it? And do you think having the Middle Ages setting up to that point, which hints at the police following them, is a part of what made it effective?
I like the ending a lot. And I think it particularly works because we have the setup of the police throughout, which at first seems like when they just cut the narrator's head. I can't remember if they cut his throat or they cut his head off, but when they attack the narrator, at first it's like, oh my goodness, well that was a comical way to end a scene. And then like it continues to build on itself throughout. So I think them getting arrested is the perfect anticlimax for the end of the film. But I also think it works because in a way, this movie almost has the same feeling of something like, say, The Muppets, where it feels like a bunch of people putting on a show rather than an actual medieval timeline, which adds to the fact, like, these people are playing multiple different characters, and it's obviously them multiple different times. Like, I think it adds to that feeling of, we're making a movie, and oh no, the cops have showed up, and we don't have a permit, and we kind of accidentally killed somebody earlier. Oh no! Like, it works on, like, multiple levels of humor, I think.
Yeah. Now seems like as good a time as any to confess that I didn't really notice any of the times that the actors were recycled. They're all just kind of British man number 1, British man number 2.
That's a good point. I agree with that. I mean,
they're some of the greatest comedians who ever lived, Christian.
Yeah, they're great, Zach. They're still British man number whatever to me.
But I'll add on before Christian is too smart for me. That they put a lot of effort into actually grounding it in the middle ages, and it actually there's so much, like, the makeup is actually pretty good, like, for the time, and the costumes are really good, and the props and everything.
Except
like,
when they're not meant to be.
Except when they're not meant to be.
Like the 3-headed giant who never moves.
Right. And sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not. So there's a lot of layers to this onion, is what I'm saying.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I don't have much more to add. Though I will say, Zach was talking about how the whole, like, police thing was building up throughout, and I was sitting here thinking, that sounds a lot like having a plot to me. I don't know.
You can have a recurring gag without having... There is a plot here, but it's very, very loose. It's basically just a light strand to hang jokes on. And some of those jokes recur. Like in Monty Python, every now and then you'll have a sketch that refers back to an older sketch. But I don't think I could diagram this plot. I couldn't put this script up on the board and say, all right, act 1, kids. Like...
I think the lightness of the strand is pretty subjective.
And the strand gets pretty thickums towards the end. It's like the man kills everybody in the car and the military comes, almost type of thick. Ooh, there you go, Christian. Feel that burn.
We're breaking the boundaries of reality here.
Oh, speaking of breaking boundaries of reality, the fourth wall breaks are also very effective. And I feel like they had one parentheses 1 free coupon for having a direct actor look at camera moment in the Castle Anthrax, and that was it. And even the fourth wall breaks have variety. And I just think that's, and just, I don't know, it's just they're just a really good comedy group, and I think they did a really good job, especially with how limited they were in their knowledge and using technicians from BBC and such. But anyway, any final thoughts before we go on?
I don't think so. I liked it.
Okay.
This isn't a critical thought, but they got some of their stock music for this film from the DeWolf archive, and I use the DeWolf archive for my short films. So that was a fun little point of notice.
You should use the organ thing at the end. I love that.
I do like that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now this would usually be when Zach tries to take over, but this time I have seen the lady floating across the lake, and I have claimed the throne as King Mitchell of the Cookie Pockets.
Okay.
And I will say we are doing Week in Review.
We are,
Hey!
yes.
Except it's a special one this time because we went to an undisclosed location and we witnessed the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy. So my brain can hurt after hearing more Edgar Wright bass in my ears. So I don't know how we can introduce this. I'm not used to this. I don't know. Let's start with Shaun of the Dead and what we thought of that, guys.
Yay.
Yeah.
very quick.
3.5 out of 5. It was fun. It was funny. And I as my first introduction to the Peg Frost dynamic, I found it particularly charming. I think I've heard different preferences from different folks in the reviews that I've seen in terms of whether they like the dramatic or the comedic moments more. I tend to like the comedic stuff and the first half of the film much more than the ending. I just think it works better, and the ending kind of loses me when it sort of becomes, I think, to some extent, standard zombie fare. But I think great fun, well directed, 3.5 out of 5.
Well, I really like Shaun of the Dead. I really like all the films in this trilogy because they're not just comedies, and because Shaun of the Dead is very much a comedy, but there's aspects of it that are very much straight horror. Hot Fuzz is a comedy, but there's aspects of it that are legitimately cool as an action movie. And The World's End is a comedy, but the science fiction in it is it's nothing to sneeze at. So I think Shaun of the Dead really works because it balances those comedic moments with the more grounded moments, and you've got that contrast, which makes the funny stuff funnier. I think that if it was nothing but the gags and the zombies weren't taken as seriously, I don't think the movie would be as funny or as effective. So it gets a 4 out of 5 for me. Also because I love Peg and Frost. I think they're a great duo, and Edgar Wright knows how to direct them extremely well.
Mm-hmm. I really like a lot of the aspects of Shaun of the Dead, more so in the beginning than the end. And I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, the same as Christian, because I feel like you have a lot of creative flexibility at the beginning of a zombie film rather than the end of it. And I feel like the end of it, you really have to know what you're doing. And when the film tries to not take itself seriously towards the end, and then all of a sudden has to insert dramatic moments, I feel like it feels a little bit artificial. It felt like we're kind of swimming from scene to scene, treading water, I guess. I don't know. I don't swim. Treading water stinks still. But anyway, I felt like we're waiting. That's what I meant. Waiting through the swamp towards the end.
Yeah.
And yeah, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, but I really liked it as an Edgar Wright film, and I thought there were some really memorable moments, at least in the first half. The last half felt a little bit more generic. But Hot Fuzz was probably my favorite one, and
Great.
I was very taken aback and then heavily invested because of the ending. And the ending started to go on at just the right pace. It wasn't like Blazing Saddles where it's just never ends, but it was more like they feel like they had to tie every loose end. And you thought, oh yeah, the loose ends can just dangle there because they're funny to look at. Nope, we're going to take this really seriously and tie them all off.
That sea mine is going to blow up.
Right. And I gave the film a 4, and I thought that, kind of similar problems with kind of trying to make things more meaningful than they really are. But I still thought it was really, really good. And I thought they pulled off the action sequence really well. It was surprisingly like a good action sequence, too.
Yeah.
And I thought the story aspects were woven in there really well. And I thought there was some pretty surprising moments. But what did you guys think?
Yeah. I gave it a 3. So I guess that would make it my least favorite, but I still enjoyed it a lot. I think it sort of took a minute to get going for me. Like when he's just kind of grumpy cop, not much going on in the country. Before the plot really kicks in, I was kind of just like, eh. But once we get to the end and the action sequences started occurring, I was like, oh yeah, this guy definitely directed Baby Driver, and it all made sense to me. So yeah, it was fun. I don't have much more to add. My 3 is not really an indication of dislike more than it is like a different level of how much I liked it, I would say. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I really like Hot Fuzz. I think technically it's probably the best of the 3 because the editing is absolutely incredible, especially since I'm pretty sure they shot this on film, which would mean that they would actually have to splice all those different pieces together, which is not only an artistic achievement, but a massive physical and technical achievement as well. I love it. I think it's really funny. And I also think the ending, when it spontaneously turns into a Western right before the action scene breaks out, is really, really cool. Him turning around at the door of the police station with the toothpick in his mouth is probably one of the coolest shots in all the cinema.
Yeah. Okay. The World's End was something. That was a powder keg waiting to blow up, and we didn't even know there was a powder keg. And
Dear listeners, if you want to watch The World's End, watch it before hearing all of our spoilers.
oh yeah,
Yes,
So
I would recommend watching all three of these in order personally, but I do think World's End, you get more out of it if you've seen the first two first. But.
right, and you don't even feel like Simon Pegg's genuinely just three different people. Like it's absolutely insane. Same thing with Nick Frost too, to an extent. But I don't even know what to say about The World's End. I believe I gave it a 4, and I was thinking it might be my favorite one, but there was some really like unnatural inserted lines, and to me, towards the end, I felt like it was like some type of love story or something about these guys towards the end. I was like, wow, you guys really just made this a whole like alien invasion thing. You're trying to bring me back to reality. Oop, there goes gravity. And I don't even know.
No.
I don't even know how that would work thematically. But I mean, those were so isolated, and I thought the general surprise of everything and how well it was executed and how much investment went into creating this narrative was so apparent from Edgar Wright's perspective. So I really liked it. Zach definitely blew up my mind like they were blowing up the aliens' minds in it. So
I loved The World's End. It was definitely my favorite. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, even though it probably doesn't deserve that high of a number. Like, if I was really, really being a critic, I feel like technically it might even be the least impressive of the three, which I think Zach thinks as well. But I love it. I think I'm just a sucker for the whole high school gang gets back together for one last hurrah, as we'll see in one of my other picks for this season. But and in that sense, I really kind of like the romantic side of it, not necessarily like romantic between two partners, but even just like
romanticism.
The romance in the platonic connection between best friends. And Simon Pegg's just freaking amazing in it, I think. And, it just really hit me hard, and maybe it was watching it with other friends, but I just found it to be tremendous.
Yeah, I really love The World's End as well. I will agree, I think technically it is the least impressive of the three. It's kind of the most normal of the three in terms of style. It might be Edgar Wright's most normal movie in terms of style.
Wow. Good for him.
But I do really love it. I have to update my review because I think I am a little too harsh on it in my review on Letterboxd. Because I recognize more and more clever setups and payoffs in the jokes every time I watch it, as with any Edgar Wright movie. I think the performances are really great. And I see a lot of my relationships with my own friends, including you guys, in the relationships between the friends in the film. And this is going to sound extremely egotistical, but I do see some of Gary King in myself as well.
Not even a little.
Specifically,
put down that beer, Zach.
No. My thing is, I have this deep worry of becoming like an immediate has-been. I have this deep fear of peaking in college or peaking in high school. And a big part of me worries that in 15 years, you guys are going to have jobs, and I'm going to rock up like Gary King and say, instead of let's do the Golden Mile, let's do a season 15 of Cookie Pocket and get the gang back together. Which, they aren't too different.
I'll be like, Zach, I'm in Afghanistan. Don't make me do this anymore.
Yeah, but I think The World's End is an extremely relatable film. It's a really emotional film. It's a really funny film. I absolutely love it. So, yeah, I recommend all three of these movies.
Yep, I also recommend them. So. Yeah. Yep, and that's Christian's input right there. So,
we
will go to the rundown where numbers go to Zach. I mean, Zach gives the numbers. Zach, I don't know. The numbers go to Zach, but because it goes to his brain unconsciously, and he consciously brings us the numbers of which rate will we give him.
You're not describing this segment well, but okay.
Excellent. I think
I'll describe your
Zach...
face well.
Oh!
Mitchell, are you ready? Yes, I am.
Do you need some cold water? I mean, okay, moving on.
Tap water. Wow, we're blowing this. Okay, go.
3, 2, 1, go!
Cookie Pocket is 3-Headed Knight.
3 out of 5.
Flesh wounds.
3 out of 5.
Coconuts.
4 out of 5.
The French.
2 out of 5.
English types.
3 out of 5.
Between 16 and 19 and a half.
3 out of 5.
Zach Garrigus as Prince Herbert.
4 out of 5.
The Knights Who Say Ni.
4 out of 5.
Getting on with it.
4 out of 5.
A good shrubbery that's not too expensive.
3 out of 5.
Losing a son to gain a daughter.
2 out of 5.
Tim.
3 out of 5.
The Italian horror gore rabbit.
Oh, 4 out of 5.
Mitchell Bardsley as a famous historian.
4 out of 5.
Bobbies.
3 out of 5.
The capital of Assyria.
3 out of 5.
The SP Blasio Unladen Swallow.
3 out of 5.
Sir not appearing in this film.
5 out of 5.
Bringing Klaus into it again.
3 out of 5.
The British ultimately ruining it all.
2 out of 5.
Intermission.
3 out of 5.
Opening credits.
4 out
Time.
of 5. Did we make it?
Alrighty.
No.
We have a few left over. but
Okay, all right.
we had fun.
Who's next?
Next would be Christian
Oh, my
with
goodness.
his movie, which is
West Side Story, not directed by Steven Spielberg.
That one's not even out.
Are there people in love in it?
There
people
sure
in love in it?
are. Yeah.
Gosh
Who'da
darn
thunk?
it. Gosh
know,
darn it. I need more war
Leave
movies
me
in here.
alone,
This is-
okay? I
This is
just
too happy.
we do.
What do we go? Oh,
Let me-
I was about to reveal what mine was going to be. Like.
No, we'll let him have this. We'll let him have it.
He's been having it.
As soon as we log off, I'm going to sit in a dark room and listen to "I Never Even Told You" from the end credits of Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, and
I didn't even know
just
that was a
close
thing.
my eyes and feel everything that you two won't let me. West Side Story is an iconic musical with really great choreography, and it's a product of its time, and I think it's worth discussing.
There
Okay.
you have it. It's been episode 34 of Cookie Pocket. This podcast is about film. Everybody get ready to stop your recordings. And we're about to leave, and I will see you later. Woo, 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 woo.
Bye.
Woo, woo.